Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining us on this cloudy, rainy day here in lovely upstate New York. And for our Spanish-speaking listeners, Ohayo gozaimasu, minasan. I hope that sounded good. I have been practicing. Thanks, Duolingo. So, what do we have here? It's the head from the Viggen. What have we found out? Well, from the last video title, we obviously knew it was fucked, but why was it fucked? Well, I'm going to put some of the blame on myself, and I'm going to put a bunch of blame on the machine shop that did the work, and I'm sure people will chime in the comment section, you should know better, and yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, I paid a company to perform a service. They fucked up on the service that they performed. They did do right by me by redoing a bunch of the work that they messed up on, changing a bunch of parts at no cost to me. The only cost was me taking this to them to do the work. So thanks, guys, for at least helping me on that end of things. So let's go through exactly what happened here. Well, from the last video, I showed you a bunch of scoring on the inside of the head. And we hadn't taken the bottom end off, and we hadn't figured out what was going on the bottom side of things. Well, we finally got down to what actually caused the damage in the first place. And again, this is going to circle back to that machine shop thing, because if you'll notice, you have 10 cam keeper bolts on these heads. 1 through 5 on the intake side, 6 through 10 on the exhaust side. You have two different types of bolts that sit on this head. One is an oil supply bolt. One is a bolt that just holds it in place and keeps the tension. You'll also note that there is a groove on the inside of these cam keeper bolts that's on the oil supply bolt side to keep the cam journals lubricated. And let me come around and show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to be doing this a bunch in the video, so I apologize for the zoom in buzz and zoom out and nonsense, but here we go. So this is the oil supply bolt. You'll see that groove that sits on the inside to supply the cam journal with oil, and this one does not. Just a regular 12 millimeter, sits on the outside, holds everything in place. Well, the machine shop had indeed put everything in the right number. So 1 through 5 were in fact on the intake side, and 6 through 10 were in fact on the exhaust side. What they did not do, however, and what I failed to notice, was they did not put the cam keeper in the right orientation, which is how I'm holding it here. This is how it was sitting on the intake side. It was in fact like this. And when I show you the bottom, you'll see why that's a problem, because there's no oil supply on this side while there is on that side. So essentially, mine was sitting like this, and my cam journals were starving for oil, because even though the oil supply was on the bolt was on the right side, the actual cutout to provide said oil was not. So just high heat, high friction, no lubrication, aka what Gordon Ramsay would call a recipe for fucking disaster. So what else went wrong? That's the big question. That's where I was left after I had taken everything apart. Okay, cool. They were going to fix the head, but what else happened? Did something happen to the crank? Did something happen to the oil pump? The timing cover where everything sits? What about everything else that sits along this oil feed supply route that all these journals in high tolerance clearance areas need clean, fresh oil to sit in, especially this fucking Viggen? So what did we find? Well, here was the new oil pump that I had put in on the rebuild, and let's get some ASMR going here, because, ooh, listen to this. Put it closer to my mic. Hear that? That's the sound of a fucked up oil pump. So as, you know, the oil was circulating, it was getting into these tight tolerance areas where oil pump cover sits right along the crank. So that was the other thing that got messed up. Check it out. This is a brand new oil pump housing that I had gotten for the car. Got really lucky a few years back and held on to this because, you know, you never know sometimes. Well, toast now. I hope that's coming through nice and clear. So I hope it sounds just as good to you guys as it sounds to me. So anyway, I got really lucky. Actually, I couldn't recommend this enough. Simple Green aircraft and aero parts cleaner. Wow. I took that chemical and a nylon brush and a toothbrush to the original oil pump, which survived the original detonation of the block and head at 180,000 miles from 1999. Didn't have a single mark on the inside of that oil pump or the gear, actually, but I decided not to use that pump itself. But I did reuse the housing. I cleaned it up, and man, it came out looking almost just as good as this one. So yeah, so any which way, those are gone. Just make sure that I'm not blurred out anymore. It was doing that on me before. So let's see what else went wrong. So luckily for me, I had gone through each of the mains, and the mains were just fine. Let me start by saying the crank itself, thank God, knock on wood, everything by feel, by appearance, looks to be just fine. Nothing happened to the crank journals themselves. There's no scoring. There's no marks at all from what I can see. Luckily enough, the side of the piston walls not the side of the piston walls, but the side of the cylinder walls don't look that bad. The cross hatching that's on the inside doesn't look to be too bad. It just looks like a lot of improper lubrication at the top of the head led to a trickle-down effect into a couple of the other systems along the oil supply line. And just in general, I mean, having poor oil circulation and getting poor, readings to the ECM was probably affecting a bunch of other systems that I'm not even taking into consideration. I'm just looking at what I can see visually here. And let's take, for example, some of these rod bearing shells. Again, luckily my mains were okay. I opted not to change any of the main bearings. They didn't have a mark on them. I had taken them off. I had cleaned them. Really very little to no discoloration at all on either end of the shell. So I was actually very happy with that. Could not say the same for the rods. And it's upsetting because these are forged rods with brand new forged pistons and everything was brand new. It's really unfortunate that they took the beating that they did, but they are the point in the system that does take the most beating on the crank versus the mains. So, I mean, I opted to change them. These are the originals. You can see this was the original color of the shell, and it's gotten discolored from just the high heat of the oil and all the metal particles swimming around in there. Luckily, I didn't find any scoring on any of the rod bearing shells. Again, super lucky there. Again, most of the damage was limited to the head and the oil pump gear and housing itself. Where I found the most wear was probably number 2. You can see it on, I think it's this one. I think it's this one. Or was it this guy? Yes, it was actually, number 2 top. I labeled all these. You can see the heavy discoloration of the entire one. Look at that. That was the original color. This is the top of the shell. You see there's a bunch of little flakes still left. Again, no scoring. Like you can't feel anything at all. It's smooth as can be, but that's a lot of material gone. And that's what I was noticing in my oil, and I just couldn't pinpoint where was it coming from. Is it coming from the lower end? Is it coming from the top? Is it coming from something else along this line? I just never could put my hand on it. But at the end of the day, problem seems to have been rectified. A bunch of these things have been changed to new and repaired components, so none of this should be an issue anymore. The bottom end is in, the pan is in. There's new O-rings along the crossover pipes and the main tubes. Those have all been sealed. The pan is beautifully sealed. Yeah, everything should be good to go, but just a lesson learned. I got a little greedy when it came to that valve cover gasket being so nicely sealed that I figured there's no way there was a problem here, and I don't want to take off that gasket. Boy, should I have, because, I found a handful of things wrong, and I think in that video I mentioned them before. I found a couple of them, even like a couple of the cam keepers were like finger loose. So that's like another thing that, like, okay, no wonder I was having oil pressure lights right from the beginning. And Oh boy, again, in the spirit of honesty and openness, I had put almost 15,000 miles on this entire setup with the cam keepers the way that they were. So I got to give some serious credit to the engineers at Saab in general, because I don't know if another engine could have put up with 15,000 miles of, just putting the foot down to see how this thing ran. And I mean, it ran awesome in my opinion, the way that it was with all the problems that it had. So now with everything fixed, I can only imagine how good it's going to run. So I will get back to putting everything back together once I have everything back from the powder coat shop that has a bunch of accessory pieces. I'm getting a bunch of stuff repainted. It was supposed to be back in a week. It has now been almost a month. I'm hoping that by the end of this week I have everything, and then this car will getting put back together relatively quickly, because I am very eager to get this thing on the road again. And I hope you guys will join me for when I'm putting it all back together. It's kind of tough to video everything. It was so cold, and I was working mostly at night, and the garage clearances are tight because it's indoor storage, and winter I didn't have my stuff outside, so I can be a little bit more open now, and I can have a little bit more space and leave some stuff outside even though it's rainy. So either which way, thanks for joining me, guys, and I hope you'll join me on the next video. Hopefully this bad boy is running nice and smooth the next time we talk. Peace out.